today. I'm happy that you came. We were already thinking with that brother who will go outside voluntarily. Thank you for all those who are here. We are doing also a transmission, so I'm sure maybe one other will be there also. Since we are not that high, happy that you came. Maybe we could just make the circle a bit closer so that you come to the front more, that we rather really
context.
we have a round table, so it's not only the half round here, but the whole round.
But if anyone sits on the front row, it's not Anglican.
Yes. So, welcome here in the Chapel for Europe. We have invited you to that we can discuss together about the challenges of ecumenism today. We choose today because it's the beginning of the week of the prayer for unity of the Christians. So it will be a whole week. Today is the first day. It goes the whole week. There will be other events somewhere else. At the end, next week, there is the big ecumenical prayer in the cathedral with all the denominations coming together to pray for the unity. And so we are here today to start rather with this kind of reflection, of sharing, of discussing, of trying to go into our experiences which we have. Because ecumenism, that is something for the last, not only years, but decades, we have been working on that. The Ecumenical Council of Churches has been founded in 1948. The Catholic Church has done its big step in the Second Vatican Council in the 60s. And since that time, a lot has happened ecumenically. 70s, 80s, it was very strong. We have a lot of official commissions coming together, discussing the theological and the structural aspects. You have a lot of communities, parishes, groups who say, let's do something together, let's have prayers together, let's do social action together. We have a lot of actions there, which has developed in these, I think, 70s, 80s probably were the strong time, then still 90s. Today, a kind of normality is there, that we work together. At the same time, it's not the time of the biggest dynamic, how to go ahead. So for us, it was a kind of the question, where are we standing now? What have we learned from all those years and decades, from all those experiences, to say, how do we, all the Christian churches, go forward into the future? We have a lot of challenges, each church has, far beyond how we cooperate, and I think we have all the same, more or less, challenges of the churches today. So how do we face them, each one individually, but as the Christian churches? So we want to look into that today, looking back what we can learn from our experiences, seeing what we are doing today, and maybe seeing what are the perspectives we see for the future. So if we come to that, it would be nice. So, very welcome to you. We have invited you from different churches, different backgrounds, to join into this round table. At least the first round will be among us. Then we will also invite you to join our discussions. So maybe I can present you first, so that you may have an idea who is sitting here. So I may start with you, Caterina Pecridou. It's correct, yes. The official title is Program Officer for Theology and Studies at CEC. CEC is the Conference of the European Churches, so where about 140 European churches, I think, work together and have a representation here in Brussels to work for the interests of those churches in Europe. within this European political system, but also to promote theology, to promote dialogue, and you are there as an Orthodox theologian, the one who is in charge of promoting dialogue and theological reflection. Thank you for being here. Jack MacDonald, Anglican priest. I asked before what is his title, and it told me several because he has to do a lot of things parallel. So advisor for EU affairs for the Anglican Bishop for Europe is one of those. He's a professor for theology at Leuven University. So within the Anglican Church, someone who is charged with a lot of things to do. So thank you.
Good to be here.
Being here. Manuel Barrios Prieto is the Secretary General of COMETSA, the General Secretary. How around is? I don't know.
I think you'd say both ways.
Yeah. Both ways. Okay. So, of COMETSA, and COMETSA, as you might know, is the official representation of the Catholic Bishop Conferences here in Brussels. So again, a bit parallel to KEC to see what is how the interests of the churches, Catholic Church or the other churches, are within this European network. And then we invited Johannes Reitze-Landau. He is a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Brussels, here since quite some years, rather not being on these levels of commissions and official structures, but from a community or from a parish, so rather from the basis for sacrament. Thank you very much for being here. In the first round, we were thinking, I've asked each of them to present a few minutes their ideas about what are the challenges for ecumenism today, what have we experienced, what have we learned, where are we going. So, and I think I would like Jack to begin. You are very experienced for a long time in ecumenical collaboration on a lot of levels. So now, perhaps you can tell us something about the successes, because if we look at it, where we have been mid of 20th century, the churches did not talk well to one another. We have achieved a lot to have some that is so normal to be with one another. You've gone that way. You've also made the experiences, what happened on that way, and I would like you to present a bit from your experiences.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. I was saying when we had coffee before this meeting began, we'll be lucky if anyone comes because of the weather. And so you deserve high praise for turning up. And it's wonderful that I'm not the only Anglican priest here tonight. My dear colleague in Leuven, Sarah Jane King, is here at the back too. When Father Bernd says that I'm experienced, what he means is that I'm nearly 200 years old. So I do have lots of experience because I just lived a certain number of years. And what really interested me about tonight's meeting, apart from the chance to reconnect with old friends, is just the idea, which I think is quite important for all of us, about looking at challenges rather than just a continued smiley face emoji which says it's all fine, it's all going brilliantly. What has, as I asked myself, Jack, you've been ordained for nearly 200 years, so what has gone wrong in terms of ecumenism? And I hope that will be an avenue, because I'm very ecumenical, to working out what that can go right, and I'm going to try to limit myself just to a few minutes. But I'm going to begin with a little anecdote. One of the formal ecumenical accords which the British Anglican churches, the Anglican Communion worldwide, has 42 provinces, 4 of them are in the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. I'm a priest of the Church of England, and we have a relationship we have lots of relationships, but one of them is with the French Lutheran and Reformed churches, an accord called the Reuil Accord. You have to be French to say it well. And although I was a priest in the Diocese of Ely in England, was given permission by my bishop to do 3 years on secondment with the UEPAL, the Union des Églises Protestantes d'Alsace-Lorraine, which is actually French-speaking rather than German-speaking now, it depends on the war. And I was the pasteur réformé in the Temple Neuf de Metz, which I really enjoyed. It was a wonderful experience, a success of ecumenism. But I do remember, and I'm aware we're being recorded now, so I must be careful not to mention any names, one experience of Reformed Catholic ecumenism in the week of prayer for Christian unity. It was very snowy and outside, and we had a meeting in the Protestant church. And one of the speakers, as a joke, was telling jokes, sort of Calvinist jokes, against the Catholics. It was all very light-hearted, and it was all very humorous. And the PowerPoint had lots of funny cartoons. But my tummy was turning somersaults, thinking, this is catastrophic. I could see the mainly Catholic audience, because even in Alsace-Moselle, Protestants are about 5 or 6% of the population. The vast majority are of Catholic heritage, and they were not happy because someone was making fun of their faith, even in a light-hearted way. And so I think one of the prerequisites for ecumenical success is courtesy. So yes, I had to stand up and offer my apologies and to say we're really sorry about that, because we're aware that even in jest, unwittingly, unconsciously, we can actually stamp and tread on what is precious and what is dear and what is central to people's sense of identity and self-understanding. And a prerequisite of good ecumenism is that, yes, it's honest, but it is always courteous. There is never any excuse to be rude or discourteous. And we have to be very careful indeed about the jokes we tell. And putting it on a more theological basis, one of the forms of ecumenism I find really valuable, therefore, is what's called in the trade receptive ecumenism, where the first question you ask if you're in Metz with a group of Reformed Christians and Catholic Christians is, what do we love about the other tradition? What do Catholics admire and respect about Calvinists? What do Calvinists admire and respect about the wonderful Catholic Church? And that's a very good place to start. And my particular experience of that, which I won't go into now, there's no time, was when for 6 months as an Anglican priest in Cambridge, I decided to worship in a Quaker meeting class and remain a very loyal and devout Anglican, but I found my experience of Quaker worship, a tradition very different from my own, which is full of words, very enriching. What do I love about the silence of worship, which of course relates to Catholics and the Trappist tradition and what have you, but it was very, very interesting. So, I mentioned that one of the problems of discourtesy in ecumenical meetings is that it stamps and destroys and attacks what's dear to people. But that leads me to a different point, maybe an even deeper point. What is it that's deep and cherished and dear to people? Let me give you an example. Before this meeting, we were upstairs having coffee, and you have here 5 highly qualified, highly theological, professional theologians. And so what interests us is, and I say this as a compliment, is doctrine and theology and ecclesiology. And at one point I was saying, I could talk about that for hours. And I could, I really could. And if I talked about it with these people, they might even be interested. But I'm conscious that most people in the churches, the laity, who are the people of God, would fall asleep. Because lots of what professional ecumenical theologians are interested in, and here I'm borrowing directly from a former Bishop of London, Richard Charters, who used to draw a distinction between ecumenism professionals and the church. So the ecumenism professionals were, forgive me, people like us, who are really, really knowledgeable, who have PhDs or are doing PhDs, who write articles which other ecumenism professionals read and comment on. Before this meeting, I was marking and looking at a PhD on Anglican-Lutheran relations. That's my job. I love that. But in fact, in terms of what interests the parishes and the ordinary people, it might be something very different. I'm very conscious, and we touched on this before the meeting tonight, that the laity might be far more interested in evangelism and proclamation than particular doctrines of the Eucharist. They might be more interested in the basic Christian categories of proclamation, worship, and service than in particular arrangements of doctrine. How many sacraments are there? Are there 2? Are there 3? Are there 7? Is there one great sacrament, which is Jesus Christ, etc., etc.? My recent experience as an Anglican priest is that issues of what I'll call family ethics, marriage, same-sex marriage, divorce, contraception, the termination of pregnancies and so forth, the end-of-life care and the ethics of that are far more central to how people in the parishes are thinking than the number of sacraments. And that isn't to denigrate what I do. I'm very proud of what I do as a professional theologian, but I'm conscious that there's a sort of gap, possible gap, between the real vibrant interest of professional ecumenical theologians and the actual questions being asked in the parishes, where they're thinking, that's brilliant, you've worked out there are 7 sacraments, comma, but what about gay marriage? What about my daughter who declares that she's trans? And what have you? That's a more immediate need for me from the Church of God than issues of pure doctrine in the sense of sacramental ecclesiology. So there's that. And allied to that, and I'm conscious of time, is the sense in which there's a danger for ecumenism that it gets overtaken by events. So yes, the Anglican Church, in terms of the British Isles, has lots of formal, full communion and partial communion agreements with other churches in the world. If I spoke Swedish, could get a job in the Church of Sweden, which is a Lutheran church. I don't speak Swedish, so there's no risk to people in Stockholm, but I could do. And vice versa, which is far more likely, people who are of these pastors in the Church of Sweden, a Lutheran Episcopal church, could get a job as a bishop or priest or deacon in the Church of England. No problem, that's great. But I celebrate that, I rejoice in that. But in many ways, in terms of what we're doing in the world, ecumenism has sort of been overtaken by interfaith issues and interconvictional issues, say in Belgium, where the laïcité organisée is also recognised by law alongside the culte reconnu. So if we say, oh, it's great that the Christian family is talking together, it is great that the Christian family is talking together, but where are the Jews? Where are the Muslims? Where are the Hindus? Where are the secularists? What can we do together with them that will work? A quick advertisement for something that happens in Holy Trinity Brussels, which is the only Anglican church in the Brussels region. We have a wonderful project called Community Kitchen, which gives 6,000 hot meals per week to people in our city who are hungry and cold, not least today. Wonderful. And what makes it for me especially wonderful is that the number of Anglicans involved is high, but we have Catholic and Protestant and Orthodox and Muslim and secularist support. And it's that, in a sense, that makes it even more wonderful. That it's not just one brand of person, it's lots and lots and lots of people. I'm conscious of time and the need to stop, so I'm going to stop there. But my final sentence will be, I love ecumenism, I love my colleagues, I love the churches being one together, but I'm conscious of the points which I've just raised and how they help us to perhaps to modify our ecumenism to make it even sharper and even bigger. Sorry to go on, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we will go on with the professional theologians, because that's what we are here now. Katharina, I would like to ask you to continue. You're really in this also scientific and research work and working for the understanding of theological implications of ecumenism, of working together of the churches. So, what is your point of view at how we have progressed together, coming together as so many churches in CAC? Catholic Church also goes along with that. What are the progresses? What is the situation? What needs to be done to develop further that we come together as the Christians inside Europe?
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming tonight, despite this cold weather. Yes, for us it is a professional conversation, but it's also an existential conversation, because it is part of what makes us Christians, participating in ecumenism. So I think that's wonderful that you're here with all of us to discuss this. And as I was thinking what kind of challenges I should address. I was wondering maybe that one of the questions that we should address is, what do we have in mind when we think of ecumenism, and what does it mean for us, and where do we place ourselves in this movement of many different expressions that is happening, focusing on Christian unity. And I thought maybe I will refer to the different expressions and some of the structures, and address only a little bit of the challenges, institutional challenges, and then in the conversation maybe we get into more content. So I think it is important to bring to our attention different expressions of ecumenical dialogue and the work of reconciliation of Christians, as well as the variety of instruments that work for Christian unity. Ecumenism is a movement. It consists of several expressions, experiences, spiritualities, but also actions, projects, and programs. In my short reflection, I will briefly mention some of the well-known ecumenical platforms, and also refer to some of the challenges that relate to their institutional character. Conciliar ecumenism is the classical model for ecumenical dialogue that has been adopted by the majority of the so-called mainline churches. I guess most of us here on the panel represent mainline churches. And this is since the beginning of the ecumenical dialogues, official dialogues in the 80s more or less, and beginning of official ecumenical institutions in the 50s. This model calls churches to visible unity in one faith and in one Eucharistic fellowship, expressed in worship and in common life in Christ through the service to the world. And the aim of this movement, of this model, is to strengthen a joint Christian witness to the world. Conciliar ecumenism seeks agreement or consensus on a variety of areas: doctrinal, theological, spiritual, ethical. It uses commissions, committees, and working groups to discuss divisive or different perspectives. It works through consultation and study processes and the drafting of commonly accepted papers and statements. Most of us participating here tonight, in some way or another, we are involved in this kind of ecumenism, conciliar ecumenism, as we also do advocacy work and focus on the dialogue of churches with the EU political institutions. On the global level, a representative organization based on this model of ecumenism is the World Council of Churches. Ecumenical fatigue and frustration, because of the focus of discussions on major divisions, can be a serious challenge to conciliar ecumenism. Another international organization that is embracing this model of ecumenism is the Global Christian Forum, which is constituted by the so-called four pillars: the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity of the Catholic Church, the Pentecostal World Fellowship, the World Evangelical Alliance, and the World Council of Churches, which four members are the founding members of this organization. The forum understands itself as a Christian open space for all traditions to meet and nurture unity by fostering mutual respect and understanding, as well as addressing together common challenges. Instead of committees and drafting agreed documents, the forum focuses on the sharing of personal testimonies and stories of how individual Christians who participate in the forum events came to faith, as well as group discussion and exchange with one another during their meetings. Although the Global Christian Forum introduced a new way of engaging in ecumenical conversations, the fact that the 4 pillars need to approve and appoint each participant to its gatherings, while often results in gatherings where churches are represented mostly by church leaders, whereas other church members are absent. And this is a major, I think, challenge in the so-called institutional ecumenism that we face in our organization as well. Ecumenical youth organizations, such as the World Student Christian Federation, there is a branch in Europe, and the Ecumenical Youth Council in Europe, have historically played a significant role in the establishment of global ecumenical structures. These organizations are often oriented towards social justice programs and bring together university students, but also other young people from different cultural and ecclesial backgrounds. Although their service is very crucial for our global church, they often struggle with resources. Cooperation between ecumenical youth organizations and other ecumenical structures, and the engagement of the latter with perspectives and needs of younger generations, is an ongoing challenge in the ecumenical movement. As I conclude my intervention, I would like to refer to 2 recent methodological approaches to ecumenism. The first one, Jack already mentioned, is receptive ecumenism, which has been described by many as the herald of the springtime of ecumenism. Receptive ecumenism as a project was introduced by Catholic theologian Paul Murray from the University of Durham, but very quickly received broader academic and church recognition. The innovation of receptive ecumenism is that instead of asking, what can other Christian traditions learn from us, it asks, what can my own tradition appropriately learn with integrity from other traditions? I want to conclude by referring to the movement of transformative ecumenism that was launched last summer by the Council for World Mission, which is a global missionary organization, which understands the church as a community of transforming disciples who boldly share the good news of transformation with the world. It advocates for justice and dignity for all of God's creation, asserting that these are pivotal for the realization of the promise of abundant life for all. It also advocates for dismantling hierarchies within communities and also our churches in the manner of Jesus Christ, and works for decolonization, liberation, and restoration of the oppressed ecumene of past and present empires. And I want to stress decolonization. This is not a popular topic in Europe, but I think as Europeans we need to address it, and we need to remember that in the ecumenical movement. So briefly, these are some of the glimpses of ecumenism, and I think when we talk about the ecumenical movement, it is important to keep in mind and in conversation all these different streams that constitute the big movement of the church. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the different approaches to it, and we have to see. Probably each one of us is in some kind of these movements in, and we have to find a way how to come together with all the different approaches. Father Manuel, you're working ecumenically with Comeza together with CAC as a representation of the churches in the European Union. You've been with the Spanish Bishops' Conference in charge of the Secretariat for Ecumenism and Interreligious Dialogue. So you have a lot of experiences, and you are also able to tell us what you see as the challenges from these experiences for today and for the future of us churches together.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And as was already said, thank you to all of you for coming. And afternoon, snowy afternoon here in Brussels, to this beautiful place which is the Chapel of Europe, that has united us, gathered us in many occasions. So when I was invited to this meeting, to this round table, and I spoke with Bernd and Sabina about it, I started thinking what might be some inputs that I can give you, or things that I'm thinking related to ecumenism. As was said, I have a bit of experience with ecumenism because I was responsible for 9-10 years of the Secretariat of the Bishops' Conference, the Spanish Bishop Conference for Ecumenism and Interreligious Dialogue. So I participated in many meetings. I was in the meeting in the General Assemblies of the World Council of Churches in Busan, and now the one that was celebrated last year. And they also organized some meetings in Spain. So I was preparing this meeting, I was a bit thinking about my experience in these years. But I've also been parish priest for many years in Madrid, so I have also the experience of trying to implement in my parish a bit of practical ecumenism. And how to do this, what are the challenges. So I prepared a few points. I'm not going to read them, I'm just going to go through them that maybe can help us for our discussion today. So I wanted to start with the theme of the week of prayer for this year. Well, we're starting today, as was said, 18th of January, the week of prayer for Christian unity. And you know that we have some materials that are prepared each year for this week of prayer. And this year, if you can see them in internet, in the website of the Vatican or the World Council of Churches, this year the materials have been prepared by a group from Burkina Faso, helped by the community of the Chamin Neuf, that some of you know. And I think they're very interesting, and they're also related to the theme or to the topic we're discussing this afternoon. So the theme of the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity of this year is, you shall love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. The text that is quoted is from St. Luke, and is a text that follows with the parable of the Good Samaritan, in which Jesus explains who is our neighbor. So why is this interesting? I think we have Alberto here, maybe he can explain us better, but Burkina Faso is in a very difficult and complicated situation. There's a lot of insecurity, there have been Islamistic attacks, there have been attacks targeting churches, a lot of churches are closed. In some cities, Christian celebrations take place, but always a bit with the help of the police to secure the places. So in this context, how does ecumenism apply? How does the week of prayer, how is the week of prayer lived? Why have they chosen this theme? So I think it's interesting for me to see. I prepared in Spain for 9 years, always the National Week of Prayer in the different dioceses. I was in charge of translating the materials into Spanish, giving them to the different dioceses. And I had this experience of how this week of prayer is celebrated in different places. And how it is a moment of unity. In Madrid, for example, we had a pilgrimage going to different churches to celebrate the Week of Christian Unity. We were received by some church, we preached in other churches. So it's a very nice experience, but I think now we're feeling that we're always doing the same thing, and there's no progress. This is something, and there's no progress. Some people speak about, the winter of ecumenism, that we're now after this very nice phase after the Second Vatican Council, a lot of enthusiasm for inside the Catholic Church and the other churches that started a bit before. So what has happened now? We're a bit, seems that things don't continue or not going on. What is the importance of this week of prayer, how we celebrate it? Today was interesting. I celebrate all days Mass in Commissary, and a person came after the Mass. I spoke about the week of prayer for Christian unity, and this person came and told me, well, why is Christian unity so important? Why do we need to pray for Christian unity? Isn't it better that churches compete with each other? So I had to explain him about, obviously, that the unity of Christians is the design of Jesus, so it's not something that is our invention. And then what the Lord wants is that we're united. So that's the thing I wanted to share with you today. Then, on challenges for ecumenism, I think we have to be aware of the context, social, cultural context in which we live, and in which we try to have some to do ecumenism. So I think a very important cultural issue today is what we call relativism, postmodernism, in which we are. So now we are in a moment where I think there's not really a deep search for truth. I think there's more a tendency to feel as more important what I feel, what I think, what are my beliefs, than really what are the facts, what is the truth. And this, I think, in some way affects ecumenism. When we're not really looking for the truth, when everything is more or less valid, I think that is an obstacle or a challenge for ecumenism. And we're living in this culture today, of fake news, of I would say half-truths and so on, that really in some way hinder a development in dialogue and deep theological dialogue. Then I would say another challenge for ecumenism, or something related to the context in which we live ecumenism today, and that affects our commitment, is the secularism in our society. Obviously, a lot of people are leaving our churches. Not only they're leaving our churches, I think also the churches have lost a bit of moral authority. In the case of the Catholic Church, through the scandals that have taken place. So I think now we really feel sometimes that the differences between our churches are really insignificant if we compare it to the world around us, where there's really indifference. Really, how important it is if I understand the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist in one way and another one understands it another way, when most of the world around us are really indifferent, don't know about faith, don't know about our creed, and maybe even people inside our churches are not aware of this either. No? I think I already mentioned a bit of this. Then I think another challenge that is important, that came to my mind when I was preparing this, has to do with theology as an academic discipline. I think we're living a moment when theology is not more interesting for many people. Studying theology is really a vocation, because it's difficult to find a job because of many things. So the lack of theologians and of good theologians, I think, also affects ecumenism in this present moment we're living. Then, and this I think is really an important thing, and I wanted to also quote the ecumenical patriarch on this. The ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew, he intervened in the General Assembly of Keck in Tallinn some months ago, and he talked about something very interesting. He criticized what he called a new ecumenism. And by this, he described it as looking for the unity of Christian churches around what are labeled as traditionalistic values. So that means that sometimes there's a kind of ecumenism that is not an ecumenism of discussing, of trying to agree on issues that have to do with our faith. It's more an ecumenism that puts together people that believe or that sustain certain values. What is behind this? Well, I think what is behind this is all this discussion about, that also is in our churches, about different moral values. For example, it has to do with what was mentioned before about homosexuality, same-sex couples. Now in our Catholic Church we have this very big discussion about blessing same-sex couples. And this is an issue that divides churches, and divides churches from inside. And sometimes we have people that gather together on these values or on the opposite, so they are favorable to same-sex marriage, even if they are from different churches, and that seems to create a new kind of ecumenism, which the Patriarch said it's a challenge for us today, because this then brings to culture wars. And I think this is a very interesting sort of a thought he said. Then other challenges, just to mention them, we have the war in Ukraine. And if we see the consequences of the war in Ukraine for ecumenism, we see how sometimes political issues or other issues really affect the way we try to do ecumenism. And then I think another challenge is the way we understand unity. So some people understand unity as a unity in teaching, in doctrine, a unity in the sacraments, a unity also in governance. Other Christians will be happy with a unity that is a bit more minimal. So what is the unity that we really are pursuing as Christians? So these are challenges I find. And if I have a minute, do I have a minute more?
1 minute.
Okay. So if I have a minute, just to say a few things I would see as way forward to this. So I think now, in this time we're living, some people speak about normality or normal ecumenism. I think in this time we're living is not a time for deep theological discussions. Because of this culture of relativism, because maybe we're not very formed in our churches for theological discussions, or the people that are formed are very unelite. So I think it's a time possibly to live together, to try to also be happy with what we have attained. As was said before the Second Vatican Council and before, really it was, things were very difficult. Now we can be together, we can pray together, we can share things together, we can work together. Here, for example, in Brussels, we work together with KEC in many things. And there is a very, very good agreement between Christian partners and here in our advocacy work. So this is also ecumenism. So I would say it's not time maybe to look for theological agreement. It's time to work together and to live with normality. I think we cannot accept the situation as it is. No. The Lord calls us to Christian unity and to a visible, I would say, Christian unity. But I think it's a time to wait, to pray, to be together, and to do things together. We can worship together, we can pray, we can evangelize together. I think we can. We can dialogue with culture, we can dialogue with the world. We can, And then it was said also before, I think it's very important to try to put together ecumenism and interreligious dialogue. They're not the same thing. In ecumenism we try to go towards a unity between us. In interreligious dialogue we look to understand each other and to work together and to work for the common good. But there is a very special relation of us Christians with the Jewish community and with the Muslims. So with the Muslims, for example, in the Catholic Church, the Pope has signed this document with the Imam of Al-Assad on human fraternity. I think that's very important. So it's a way to see that there's a common understanding between Muslims and Christians on the humanity that we all share, that we're all a human family, and I think that's very important. And with the Jews, we have to acknowledge that we come from the same root. So it's so there, and I think in some way ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, at least with these religions of the Abrahamic tradition, have to go together. And just a few positive experiences that I've experienced in these years, just to conclude, where I think ecumenism is really going forward. For example, I've been involved in the Alpha courses. I think the Alpha courses are really a very good experience, and it's an ecumenical experience of trying to evangelize in an easy way together, and we can do that together. And I think that's a very positive experience, and it has a very strong ecumenical dimension. Another experience that I think is helping ecumenists now is the persecution of Christians. So in the persecution of Christians, Christians are together. The Pope Francis speaks of an ecumenism of the blood. So here I think there is also a way forward for ecumenism in our times. Then I think the charismatic movement is very important also for ecumenism, doing a lot of very good work, and there it's beautiful to see the worshipping services and Christians worshipping together. And to get related with the charismatic movement, there is the music, the Christian music, Hillsong and others that are really doing also very good work, and it's also ecumenical. Chamis Neuf, that also helped to prepare the materials for this year. So I think there are very good initiatives. There are like flowers in this winter that are flowering, and so it's good to see. I was very impressed, and I'm going to conclude here. I was very impressed in Busan when I went, and when the statement on mission was put forward, was published, was promulgated, and in this statement of mission, there was a main sentence or a main teaching that says, our job, our work, is to discern where the Spirit is acting and join with that action. So mission is not a mission that starts from us. It's seeing where the Spirit is discerning, the word that was used was discerning where the Spirit is acting in our world, outside of the churches, many times, and joining in that action. So I think that is very important. That means that ecumenism is also happening not just because of our work, not just because of our initiative, it's working because of the initiative of the Spirit. And we are called to join in that work that the Spirit is doing. So,
thank you very much. So, we will still ask Johannes to present. Afterwards, the floor is open so we can enter into a discussion. You are from the Evangelical Lutheran Church, a smaller of the Lutheran churches, and you are the pastor of a parish. So really coming from the grassroots, let's say, in a certain way. So, and your experiences would be quite interesting to see how it is coming from what the people expect, do, live, what you experience with them. Maybe you can give us some insights.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, dear brothers and sisters in Christ our Lord. I must confess that until I came to Brussels and later then took over the ministry of our little church here, it's in my case an expat church, people from all over the world, very small, but from hail different countries. Until then I did not think much of ecumenism. When it went beyond contact with my own partner and sister churches abroad. This was mainly due to my experience from Germany, or rather a lack of experience of ecumenism. In my home village, where I come from, ecumenism consisted of celebrating a joint service twice a year with a local Protestant congregation of the established regional church. There were simply no other churches, no other congregations, and almost no Roman Catholics. During my studies, ecumenism consisted of studying some church documents such as the Leuenberg Agreement or the Joint Declaration of the Doctrine of Justification, and above all, examining what is wrong in them from a confessional Lutheran perspective, why we reject these papers and how such unionist agreements are knitted so that as many sides as possible can agree. I only encountered a greater ecumenism during my vicariate in Cologne, as we German Protestants call the practical formation time for the ministry. In Cologne, a city with around 1 million inhabitants, a bit like Brussels, there are Christians from all kinds of churches and denominations. And as you may know, the ecumenical movement in Germany is quite firmly institutionalized in the working group of Christian churches, Arbeitsgemeinschaft christlicher Kirchen. On the one hand, on a federal level, and on the other hand, in local groups in the different cities and communes. The working group in Cologne is correspondingly large, comparable to the Brussels Interchurch Committee here in Brussels. Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Orthodox churches, all the Protestant groups, to some small ecumenical praying groups or whatever. And this group in Cologne met a few times a year. The meetings were nice. And that was it. Mainly, an ecumenical service was organized once a year for the so-called Day of Creation in October, and virtually none of it got through the respective parishes. I felt that this route was simply a waste of time. I didn't think much of ecumenism, although I have to admit that it is worth a lot to know each other and to talk to each other, at least on a leadership level. Here in Brussels, I suddenly encountered a completely different kind of ecumenism. I joined the CIB, the Brussels Interchurch Committee, and at least in this international sphere, it's totally different. Although the meetings of the CIB have so far been similar to those of the group in Cologne, and in my opinion, the annual joint service here in Brussels for the week of prayer, next week or this week, of Christian unity has no impact to the parishes as well. People here meet in a totally different way. So far, I have experienced the cooperation as a meeting of equals, more or less. The foreign churches, in particular, Anglicans, the English-speaking Catholics I met here, Episcopals, evangelicals are initially strangers here and foreigners, and they often know a much greater variety of local denominations from their home countries than I do from Germany. And many churches and groups also not always and everywhere part of a large minority church, least of all in a country as secularized as Belgium here is. This is very different from Germany, where despite a massive decline in membership in recent years, the churches continue to be a visible social factor in all-day life. In recent years, I have particularly appreciated the meetings of the Brussels English-speaking Pastors Association, short BESPA. These meetings of the English-speaking church leaders did not have a direct impact on the parishes as well, but it was important to focus on working together in the spirit of the gospel for the city, to at least accompany each other in thought and to pray together. During the Bible studies at BESPA, our prayers and coffee, there seemed to be no boundaries between us, and that was great. I enjoyed it very much. Unfortunately, for some reason, unknown to me, the people in charge ended this one day. I don't know why. So I love this group very much, and I would love to start it again. As I just said, I have always found ecumenism in the international sphere to be at least to some extent positive, because we talked and we met and we have a nice communication. On the other hand, in recent years, I have also had to experience time and again what it means to belong to a minority church, an absolute minority church, namely in contact with the large German churches. Time and again I have had to realize what it is like when others are simply self-sufficient because of their size and perceive the other as either an odd marginal phenomenon that is to be taken seriously or not to be taken seriously, or perhaps even as a competition that makes unpleasant demands on the attitude of the mainstream church. Now the question arises as to why and for what purpose we should actively dare to be more ecumenical. Why? Is it a waste of time or resources, a playground for idealists maybe? I am firmly convinced that ecumenism is the only way to respond to the development of post-secular societies, we find them at least in Europe, in order to continue to preserve a strong voice as possible that carries the gospel of God's love into the world. That's why we do this, not for ourselves. This is not a choice we have, but our mission given to the church by the Lord, as he said, according to St. Matthew 28. Of course, we could try to fulfill this mission on our own, but institutionally we are all more or less under pressure. And I'm firmly convinced that all churches in the West, even the large ones, will continue to lose weight and substance with the time. And many small voices, quiet voices, cannot be heard as well as one single powerful voice. It is therefore up to us to find forms, formats, and words, not content, no new content, but new forms, formats, and words that remain connectable and can be heard in this world. I also see it as necessary for Christians and Christian institutions to accompany the political and social discourse. This also requires a certain size. In his book, The Afternoon of Christianity, the Czech theologian Tomáš Halík impressively describes the changing circumstances of society and religion and the importance of faith for people in our time. We cannot escape this change, nor we can actively control it. But we can read the signs of the times and deal with them. We speak of inescapable contemporaneity. But we can learn and we can react on our time. This is not the first time that the institutional form of faith, what we call religion, has changed. It has changed several times in history. And now it will change again now. And the living and incisive Word of God remains unaffected and finds new ways. The point is not to hinder the word of the gospel, not to build walls or stumbling blocks between our fellow human beings, but to make them familiar with the word of life. That's important. And in any case, it must not be about protecting our institutions or preserving something that perhaps belongs to the past. Likewise, it is not about wanting to preserve the one holy Christian Catholic Church, because since we confess that it is alone the gift of the Holy Spirit, as you say. And as long as our Lord Jesus Christ is in charge, the Church will be there, with or without us. It is all about carrying out our mission to bring the word of life to the people, to make the world familiar with the good news of God's love. And if this is only possible by leaving our old institutions, traditions, and perhaps some of our convictions, and above all, borders behind us, we must do that. The prerequisite is that we, as very different churches, want more ecumenism for the sake of the cause, not for the ecumenism, but for the word. Because I think that is what has failed the most so far. The big players in particular are self-sufficient. And the smaller ones, that's where I see myself, have so far preferred to cultivate and intensify their confessional dogmatisms and demarcation instead of really focusing on the core of their insight and subordinating other things such as traditions as forms behind the word. The Carta Ecumenica, which contains many good approaches, can help us to achieve better and, above all, sustainable and constructive cooperation that goes beyond friendly coffee rounds, I think. Among other things, it mentions the need to be aware of one's guilt and to be prepared to repent. This applies to everyone without exception, and above all, not to resign oneself to separation. We should speak publicly together, and above all, read more Bible and pray together. To come more often together and pray together. Yeah, there's much more to say, more in a concrete way, but it's time to stop at this point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you. That was a lot of input. My suggestion would be that we take it kind of a small time, not to continue talking in the big round immediately. Take a short time to say, to think, what are the 1 to 3 points that that remain with me. So what is what I've heard, what is important, what has become important for me as a question, as an insight, whatever, and then maybe to have 2 or 3 minutes just to exchange with your neighbor. To say, oh, I at that point, what she or she was saying, that's something new for me, or that's something which confirms something which I have always felt, or whatever. So just 1 minute of just what is it that I have in my mind now after hearing that. Thank you. And then maybe 2 or 3 more minutes just with the neighbor. I have point 1 to 3. That's where I was mainly touched.
I agree with everything. No, seriously, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, very interesting.
I agree with everything.
Each one in a different way.
I like what he said.
Yes.
To admire and love. What can we learn from the other one? What can we learn from the other tradition?
Very interesting.
This is important to see what we have.
I was also impressed by this of the receptive ecumenism. So saying what you like of the other. This is not only good for ecumenism, I think this is good for human relations.
Yes.
It enriches.
Yeah.
Enriches, yes.
Yes.
It's not
Changes your way of thinking. Of what is in the other the other tradition and the other culture and the other.
So not coming to the one point where we get together, but to open up. So this is also, like you mentioned, the interreligious dimension, an opening to all. Being For me, it's always kind of, I want to become clearer who I am as a Christian to be more open for everybody. So this double dimension.
I was impressed also what you said, because I already thought of this, but now you brought it again to my mind, that sometimes when we are majority church, we really don't understand what a minority church is feeling. So it's very important to understand that you see it in different ways. And things are different.
Self-congratulations.
Things are different good for us. Things are a bit easier. For example, finding a place to work for services and so on.
And the Orthodox saying was well, the Anglican saying the Anglican.
It's really also to have this ability
What is saying good? You saying the Jews?
the situation of the other.
Yeah.
It's very important. Sometimes when we are majority church, we really
And no debate.
don't,
Lots of speeches.
are not aware of the feeling of the minority church and how they feel.
Very good from the Christian point of view. They have to do nothing.
We have the resources, we have the personnel.
Exactly.
We can do a lot. But,
That's
sure.
In our case, where I come from, Catholics were always minority.
And I was in Spain many years working on this, and they're really church, majority church, pretty Catholic church. The other churches are very, very small. So this sense of minority, sometimes we're not aware
Coming
of it.
slowly to an end, you might also find some questions to put to us on the podium here.
Then it's even more difficult to ask the question what you are not from which traditions can I take from it? The other one is just now we live
Yeah, exactly.
snowflakes.
And it's so just one example.
No, but some interesting things came out.
De l'eau?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you have enjoyed, so you have shared with one another. Maybe there are some issues concerning us here in front, where you would say, I would raise this question or this thought that came hearing what you said. And we can open up so that we can get into this discussion in the bigger round of this round table. So you are invited also, if you like, if you want to ask something or to share something, to do that now also for us all. The first one.
In our small group, and myself, for us, like a kind of the main core of like to enter in this kind of ecumenism or interreligious dialogue is dealing mainly with migration, no? Because we are in our daily life. And so also for us, at some point, all these studies about migration, they said also the religious dimension or the spiritual dimension is some kind a really important issue, no, in the process. So we feel like we can touch what Manuel was saying in our context, that we are not kind of seeing many religious dimensions of things in daily life. When we see some of these elements, we see that we are even from different religions or from different backgrounds, on our Christian traditions, we feel close. No, our question can be a little bit also from the different traditions. How do you feel migration can help us to deal with some kind of new way of doing ecumenism or interreligious dialogue, and if also what we see, that is like a kind of migration, a scapegoat, in this political spectrum also, how do you see that can be also for us, Christians also a way of helping on this process of living together, or sorry, but maybe.
Thank you. Yeah. Somebody wants to react immediately?
Very quickly, first of all, I am Belgian and British, and just to say that I watch with a species of horror what's happening in the Parliament in Westminster yesterday about the scapegoating and the threat to, the joyous threat by a British government to abandon international law and so forth, just to admit that. And to express my regrets about that. I just would use, I was saying to Katharina, I agree with everything that's been said, and to answer very, very quickly, yes, I think migration is a sort of massive, huge phenomenon which is changing the landscape completely. And so just in a little micro context of the Anglicans in Belgium, it's overwhelmingly clear that with Brexit, the number of people who look like me is in free fall, but the numbers are growing of Anglicans. Why? Because of Africa. Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, Nigeria, Ghana, these are the countries which are supplying the next generation of European Anglicans. And that changes everything because of the links with charismatic forms of worship and Pentecostal forms of worship, even as Anglicans, with Hillsong and others, and more authentically African versions of Hillsong. Everything is being changed. And my experience of that, and the lack of English, that people are speaking different languages and broadening the sense. I mean, English is our Latin, really, if you're Anglican, but less and less, you know, and that's all changing. And therefore, and I think we have to rejoice in that. This is an opportunity given to us by the Spirit. And to demonize it, I think, is extremely alarming. And to try to sweep it under the carpet is pointless. It is a huge phenomenon which is much more dominant than almost anything else in church life. For example, discussing the sacraments. And therefore, let us discuss the sacraments in a new way, given this new reality. Thank you.
May I come into that? I think I would like to refer to some positive example. Some of the Protestant churches in Europe have this project called Being Church Together in Europe, in countries like Italy, France, in Germany, in some parts where several so-called international churches, so-called intercultural churches, so-called migrant churches are there. But what they do there is first reflect theologically on what it means to receive the gifts of those who are newer in the European continent, and how we can live as one church together. But also they reflect on the gifts, the diversity of gifts that the migrants bring, and how that enriches the church. And it's not just reflection, but it's living out together as the one single community in fullness. So I think we could learn from such examples on how to really be Christians together and be the body of Christ together.
Well, we have no choice. We must learn.
And maybe, I guess, being in Brussels, I think our role is also to speak to the politicians. You're very right that migrants are the scapegoats for anything that goes wrong in Europe. So I think we need to spell this out and to stand in solidarity with them and stand for fair policies for migrants.
So I divide my time between being a parish priest in Leuven and working for the EU institutions and volunteering at the chapel. And my ecumenical experiences in those contexts have been nothing but joyful. So in Leuven, as Anglicans, we don't have our own church building, we are guests of Roman Catholic communities, and from time to time we worship together. Not just because it's the week of prayer for Christian unity, but on other occasions too. We will just worship together, and this is great. And we have a project together with Sant'Egidio, helping Syrian refugees through humanitarian corridors, so we're serving together. Here at the chapel, we get together and read the Bible and pray together. Or we organise conferences to give people something to reflect about what the Christian faith has to say about issues in public and political life. So whether that's climate change or migration or artificial intelligence, We did an Alpha course here together with Polish Roman Catholic, Jesuit in formation, a German Protestant vicar from the EKD and me, a couple of friends from the Vineyard. And this was during the COVID times. People gathered together online for an Alpha course, learning about the love of God revealed in Jesus Christ. But I'm aware that the experience of most people is more akin to what you described back in Germany, that this kind of getting together it's not so natural. And it's the same with people I trained with in the UK. My experience is rather unusual. And so I feel that my experience it's a kind of a treasure, it's something very special, and I cherish this. But what do you think would need to happen at the institutional level, where these professional ecumenists like yourselves get together? What could happen in order to translate more of this at the local level? Because, as you say, that the divide is not so much between us as Christians, it's that we need to do a much better job of telling the story to the world, that the Christian faith has something to say that is meaningful and relevant and can't be dismissed as garbage. And so how can we work at the institutional level to make more of this happen for others on the ground?
Sometimes when I wake, I would say just doing it. Later in the afternoon, I'm afraid on the reactions on the officials. Yeah, there are two hearts in my body. I don't know. If others would say let's just do it, I think I just would step in. Maybe we need more bold people who start something, and then we'll see. Maybe then it's grassroots ecumenism. Maybe we need that.
So, sorry, if I understood you well, you're saying you have very joyful experiences of ecumenism or ecumenical activities, but then on the institutional level, this is not in some way promoted, or
I think my question is, I recognise that my experience is rather unusual, and it plays a little bit to what Pastor Johannes said, that it's only since he came to Brussels that he discovered this kind of dynamic in this international forum. So my question is, what could happen at the institutional level of the ecumenical dialogues and papers and the stuff that you guys do, in order that more people could be doing ministry together instead of talking about ministry together? We could just do it.
I think you're addressing the really serious question of reception of ecumenism, ecumenical work. And I think the problem is not so much on the institutional level, because yes, there things are happening, but how we take to the grassroots level, to the local level, to the level of dioceses, parishes, congregations, and individuals, this work that is happening. And I think there, each church needs to do its homework. I mean, the organizations can do so much, but we need to involve many more people, and this has to do also with who comes to these ecumenical meetings. If it's always the same groups of people, the same hierarchy maybe in the church, then yeah, we need to find ways of including many more experiences of life and groups. But I do think that every church has a responsibility. Every church that participates, and it's a founding member, active member in some ecumenical organization, needs to go back to their members and inform about what is happening on the level of ecumenical instruments.
Just a very quick looking at that through the other end of the telescope, rather than at the institutions. Let's look at what's happening in the parishes. For example, I've been in Belgium for 12 years, and not once have I presided a marriage of two Anglicans. All the marriages I have presided in Belgium are what we call mixed marriages between an Anglican and someone else, whatever it is, most often a Catholic. Now, in terms of what happens at the parish level in terms of communion and mass and who receives communion in that context, yes, the institutions have something to say. But if the people who are the people of God in the grassroots just say, this is what we do, this is what happens, Maybe it is that there's a certain breaking of a certain church discipline, but this is what we do as the people of God in this context. It's meaningful for us. We are nourished by it. We do it. In a sense, there's a sort of momentum there, which means that the old structures might just have to bend. You know, my view of why it is that Sarah Jane is an Anglican priest is that was led mainly from the grassroots in terms of Anglicans in England, in terms of what the parishes were saying that they demanded to happen, where they felt the Spirit of God was moving, and then the bishops had to sort of follow and say, oh, he's okay. Yeah. But that was a perception, not being cynical, of the Spirit of God moving, a certain direction and sense and momentum of the Spirit of God. And so, yes, the parishes need to be aware of what the institutions are saying, and the other way around. The institutions, the hierarchies need to be aware of what the motion and momentum and energy and dynamism is in the parishes, which is pointing and teaching the institutions about maybe new ways of doing things.
I'm an Italian working in the European institutions, and I was growing in Italy, so I was growing in a country that was mainly Catholic, and here I found another reality because it's very international, and as you say, there are a lot of migrants, especially in Brussels. And in Brussels, I met also many migrants, many from Africa, and I found they change a church very easily because for them they found a different reality from what they have in their own country. So here they try to find something that they respond more to their needs. And before you were speaking about the research of the truth. So there is now the risk of relativize the difference regarding to say it's not important what is the truth, but it's important how we feel. So to don't recognize the importance of the truth, to relativize all the difference. Don't you see this risk and how we can fight this risk or to relativize the difference?
They're all very, very, very important questions. The question is, how as Christians we fight against relativism?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We understand.
Yeah. For you, it's very important the issue of truth, no?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we're living in a society where, for many people, the issue of truth is not so determinant in their lives. And as you said, people they feel that way, or they say, "This is my truth, you have yours." They don't want to enter into discussions of who's right and who's wrong. We live in this society. I think what normally is said in this society, what is important more than words is witness. It's our life and the way we live, because that's the way we can transmit a truth that is not only intellectual. So it's, I would go in that way. I think maybe it's as I said, now is not maybe a time to have very deep discussions on theological issues. It's more a time for witness and working together and being together.
This is a follow-up question because I was already thinking about this, about what you said about postmodernity, and where there's broken, the breaking of meta-narratives, the relativization of truth, which you find it as a challenge for conducting ecumenism. I'm just wondering, perhaps it's no longer the question of what is truth that we have, or people are concerned today, or in a postmodern context. It's no longer the question of, like Pilate would say, what is truth? But it would be, as you said, witnessing. So perhaps I'm just wondering if that is the case about we have to ecumenism through witnessing. Could it be now, the question should be, is not what is truth, who is truth? I'm just reflecting on this about, for example, in the Gospel of John, Pilate said, what is truth? But, Jesus didn't answer. He just quiet there in the text. But we know in the Gospel of John, it's also written there, I am the truth, the way, and the life. So it's not the question of what is truth, but it's how you relate. How do I connect this to a bigger picture now? I mean, why is it that people follow certain politicians, leaders? They have certain kind of truth that they have, populist narratives now. It's perhaps because they follow the who as the truth, as the one who says. Or let's say if the person is popular, let's say Pope Francis, in that way. The relationship is, he speaks something of truth. Because they see there's something, the who in him, the witnessing in him. So, yeah, and just that's my answer.
You were in the same.
No.
Oh, you have a different
Me
question. You have a different question, or is it all of that complex?
Mine is not a question. I would like to tell a story.
Okay.
Storytelling is a way to transmit truth in this.
Yes.
Jesus is right.
Then tell your story.
I have many stories because I lived for 5 years in Belfast. You know, in Belfast there is a great challenge. And I was involved in something that two friends of mine, a parish priest, a Catholic parish priest, and a Presbyterian minister, built together for the city. They, together with another Methodist minister and other churches, they had the idea to make a kind of festival. They called it the Four Corners Festival because Belfast is something like that in 4 different areas, and people from one area don't go to the other. So they invented that, and every year now is the 11th edition. They make theater and music and whatever, and they do that in different churches. So in a Presbyterian, to participate in something that is artistic or is cultural, people of different churches met together. And I was there for 5 years now, I don't know anymore, but I saw people getting together for many different. That was great. And another experience, magic experience, when I arrived in Belfast, I didn't know anything about other denominations, other churches. But living there, I had a minister, Presbyterian minister, my neighbor in front of me, a Methodist on my left. And we lived together, everything in the life. We don't think that it's that or that. But what he said is that it's a minority church here in Belfast, in Brussels. Maybe in Belfast, the churches are almost of the same number of people, maybe the Catholic and the Presbyterian and the Anglican have more, but it's a grassroots.
And I think it's a wonderful example how the collaboration of the churches, of the Christians as one group brings something into a society which is full of tensions and divisions. So I think that is something, you mentioned it also before, that is something really where we have a common mission, the common mission to proclaim the good news and to praise God, but the common mission also to bring it into our societies as Christians of the different denominations, to bring the society together to get more peace, more justice, more joy, more coming together. I think that's a huge mission we have together as the churches, so that we really. And I'm very happy that it goes that way. So if there was the question of truth some 50 or 100 years ago, we would have discussed whether you have the truth or I. So that is no more the case, because we know that we are, as you said, the witnesses of the one God and the witnesses of the one Lord Jesus Christ into this world, maybe with different understandings. We are talking about that, and we have to find ways to get deeper into the understanding, but going together to give a good witness to the world. So I think that's, for me, that's kind of really what ecumenism is about. Not that we among one another are on the way, that together we can go out and show the world who Jesus Christ is. It's a bit also at the core of the mission of this chapel. So this is a Christian place within this Europe, which has enough Christian roots, but still today needs to be, this needs to be shown, this needs to be filled with life, what Christianity can bring into this Europe. And we try it all together, I think, and I'm also very happy that in the chapel here in Brussels we have such a good understanding among us churches to really work together in that one mission.
Thank you.
Just a thing, because Maria Rosa, who was the last one, she's responsible here in Brussels for this new center that the Focolare movement has created here for peace and dialogue. And the Focolare movement has been very much involved in ecumenism. And I was very impressed to know that Chiara Lubich, the founder of the Focolare movement, was really the one that facilitated that encounter between Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras. That really made a big change. So it's, there are these moments of in which the Spirit is acting, moments in which there are big changes, like the Second Vatican Council, the encounter between the Patriarch Athenagoras and Pope Paul VI. So I think sometimes there are issues that maybe will push our institutions to a change, to go forward. The ecumenical movements after the wars, there was a context that favored the growing of the ecumenical movement. I think migration might be a very big issue that puts us together in different ways, because migrants are coming here and changing our culture, or enriching our culture. The work that we can do with them is also, I think, changing us as well, and the spiritual need that they have. So I think migration. I think also climate change will be another very big issue that pushes us towards a greater ecumenism.
We agreed to take 1.5 hours. Some have to go back rather longer distance in that weather, so I think we can come to an end for this discussion now. The collaboration among us, among the churches, on the level of those who are there professionally, but also on the level of those who are the members of the churches, who are the believers in God, and who say that we all together in this world, we try to go ahead, being believers, praying together, living together, giving a witness, each one, wherever he or she is. For this coming week of the Unity of the Christians, there are several other occasions, especially the big one at the end of the week, which will be next week, Thursday. There is the big ecumenical prayer, which is prepared by the Comité Inter-Ecclésial de Bruxelles, so the kind of the more or less official body where the churches come together. That is on Thursday at 7 o'clock in the cathedral. So you're very welcome to come.
Catholic Cathedral.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, sure. We have to say.
These three.
Yeah. So it's what's the official name?
Saint Michel Saint Gudule.
Yes. Okay. There. So invitation for that. Here in the chapel, you may know we have we have once a month, always on the last Thursday in the month, we have the ecumenical prayer lunch. So we meet Christians from different denominations for a prayer together, and then we have a small lunch together, just to be in a constant contact and a constant common prayer together. So that would also be next Thursday. That is then always at 1 o'clock here in the chapel. And Sabine?
I would like to point out that we will have a movie night on the 29th. The movie it's a documentary called The Gardens of Eve. This movie or this documentary is about the first experience of a pop-up monastery. Let me explain. In 2015, women from different Christian traditions and that never had lived in a monastic way, they decided to get together and to find what they had in common. So we will project this documentary, and the moderation will be also by a quite ecumenical person who was a Catholic, then became an Anglican, and now she is in the monastic life. So I think it's going to be a very interesting evening, and please, you are welcome to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's what's happening during this week. Invitation to all of that. But also an invitation, if you like, we can downstairs still take something to drink together and to continue the discussions, not in this formalized way, but in smaller groups. Thank you very much for your inputs. At least we have one small cup of the chapel here for each of you. So thank you very much.
She makes it all worthwhile. It's all worthwhile. What's the chocolate as well? Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I was chocolate. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure. Could I suggest that we end this with a prayer? Then we pray the Our Father together. I think that's the ecumenical prayer because that's coming directly from Jesus, and I think it's for all of us important to really to pray together also. Our Father,
Lord in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, and forever and ever. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you downstairs.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I say that?
Can I say a praise of myself? The first ever film I did was Leper.
Okay.
Film Dead Man Walking, and we discussed the death penalty. So there we are. That was our Christian who said, you do it. So there we are. So wonderful. Yeah. An initiative which is
Do you have any news? Did you see I didn't reply.
and I think it's unlikely to tomorrow. Unlikely to tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, the religion is Christianity. That's no, yes, interesting. I'm still reading. Yeah. Let's take this person. I think it's a whole project. I think we have to let go. He has to face execution. Let's see what happens tomorrow. We let go of the structure. Yeah,